So he is my favorite superhero. He's the one who is actually a kid and he yells Shazam and turns into Shazam. But that's
So
my favorite superhero.
sorry to interrupt. So it's the one kid one, not the one with the five kids who yell Shazam together.
That's a whole new thing with Billy Batson. So Billy Batson, okay, this is gonna take forever. Billy Batson is the original Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, but in the new DC, they split Captain Marvel's powers amongst his adopted siblings, which is now each one possesses one of the powers from the gods that spell Shazam, and then they all do that. And that's on the recording. Great. I'm just kidding. Um, okay, so yeah, I guess I will officially get started now. So yeah, today I'm gonna talk a little bit about my work as an educator with Cosplay for Science and talk a little bit about science storytelling. So a little bit about my background first. I'm a paleontologist and educator. I'm a first generation Filipino American born and raised in Los Angeles and Orange County. This is my backyard, never left because, beautiful sunny California. I got my bachelor's degree in biological sciences at UC Irvine. I was originally pre-med. I decided I hated that. And then I didn't know what I was going to do for 2 years. And then eventually I rediscovered my love of paleontology. Well, technically, I rediscovered my love of museums. And so eventually I got my master's in paleontology at Cal State Fullerton. Technically, my master's is in geology, but emphasis in vertebrate paleontology. And I know there's a lot of talk today about wanting to change careers, wanting to do both. I didn't decide to become a paleontologist until I was about 25. So for those of you out there who are still trying to decide, there's nothing saying that you can't decide and move on to where you want. And a little bit about my story today is to show you that you can find a way to incorporate everything into one awesome job. And so that's kind of what I do. Is right now I'm the collections manager and outreach coordinator at the Alf Museum here in Claremont, East Los Angeles. I am also a National Geographic certified educator. And as of yesterday, I am a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow with National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. So that means I get to be able to do more work as an educator, which is where my career is going now. And I'm also, quote, a semi-professional cosplayer. And I'll get a little bit into that later. But kind of the overall theme with all of these is that my passion lies in storytelling. Whether I'm a scientist, a cosplayer, a teacher, I love to tell stories. From when I was a little kid, you can ask my mom, my brothers and sister that I would bother them all the time with my made up stories. I used to write fan fiction because I'm that kind of nerd. Even when I'm teaching, I'm telling stories. I originally started, like I said, as a vertebrate paleontologist. My original research was in marine mammal evolution. So I used to study things like marine mammals called desmostilians. These are hippo-like marine mammals that can be found all over the North Pacific coasts. So I studied like their evolution and ontogeny, the study of how things change from baby to an adult. This is an image from my very first publication on desmostilians. My master's thesis was actually on a bone bed of Eocene mammals here in Southern California. So I studied this bone bed and looked at what animals were in there and did a little bit about the geology. And yeah, those were the teeth of the desmostilians. They are known for their really weird teeth. They kind of look like sushi rolls all stuck together if you ever look them up. So yeah. My most recent project is I was co-author on a paper that described a brand new genus and species of fossil walrus that was found here in Orange County, actually. This is Titanitaria orangensis. It is an extinct walrus, and I got to help on the paper that described it, and that was one of my more recent publications. So yeah, I'm trained as a vertebrate paleontologist with a more morphological emphasis over geology or evolutionary emphasis. And I really love that because as a scientist, what we did is we use our research as our stories. But in more recent, or while I was doing it, actually, I've always loved talking about my research. I love, doing science communication online. I loved going out into the public and talking about fossils. I'm a nerd. I love Jurassic Park. Whenever people would ask me, are you a paleontologist? Like, yeah. Do you like Jurassic Park? I'm like, sit down. Let me tell you all about Jurassic Park. So, part of me just always had this passion to talk about my science and connect it to everything around me. And so as I continued on through my path, I did more and more outreach. I did more and more educational work. And the more I did that, the more I realized that I loved education or being a teacher more than I loved paleontology. And what happened was that I realized is I could be both. As a science teacher, being a scientist helps me to understand the process of science and helps me to pass that ideology, that framework to my students on much better. And it also allows me to give them the opportunity to experience science firsthand by bringing research methods into my informal education or more formal education that I do at the Alf Museum. So here I am talking with kids about a dinosaur bone at a Comic-Con, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. Here I am as a mentor for exchange students from Mongolia. Through part of my work, I've been able to travel to a lot of great places. I went to Mongolia for the last 2 summers as part of the Institute of the Study of Mongolian Dinosaurs to teach paleontology to a remote village to remote villages in the Gobi. And yes, definitely pre-COVID memories. I miss this so much. I miss being able to go out and just teach people. But I've been able to do a lot of virtual content recently, which I'll talk also a little bit about later, because as a teacher, you have to adapt. Whatever method you use, you can still find ways to reach students and audiences and use stories, whether virtually or in person. A lot of my research now actually revolves in DEI and accessibility work within science education. So that revolves around things like, increasing representation within science outreach, utilizing universal design for accessibility within museums and educational programming. Here is one of my more recent research projects on utilizing augmented reality for inclusive exhibit design, where we use augmented reality for multilingual and low vision blind audiences. We also were trying to incorporate video for closed caption and closed captioning for deaf and hard of hearing audiences. So there was a lot that we were able to do utilizing virtual reality for education. And this was one of my more recent projects. My largest and biggest project that I'm currently working on now is called the Cosplay for Science Initiative. And that is where all of my loves and interests combine into one thing, where I take my passion for storytelling, my passion for paleontology or science in general, my passion for nerd things, and combine all of them to get people to love and understand science in the world around them. And yes, that is my Dr. Grant cosplay back when I was a few pounds skinnier and I could fit into it. But it is still one of my favorite cosplays. Hopefully I'll get back into it post-COVID. But the reason I like to talk about this is because one of my favorite sayings is that storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. Whatever we're doing, all of the basis of our culture, our languages revolve around storytelling. In the Philippines, right? We all understand that storytelling is the basis of our get-togethers. You chismes with your cousins, you hear your moms and titas talking about you and your cousins in the background. Our whole culture, we are a verbal historical culture, right? We pass down our history through our stories. So whether we're friends, families, scientists, educators, or even just strangers meeting for the first time, the core of everything we do is storytelling in the exchange of information. Here is a basic narrative structure. Let's think about like Star Wars, right? You set the scene, the Empire has taken over the galaxy, right? Then you've got a problem. You've got the Empire is gonna destroy everything. They've destroyed the Jedi. And then you bring in Luke Skywalker, right? He's your main character. He's got a problem where he has to go find Obi-Wan Kenobi, where these droids come from. Then you got your rising action as you build up to heading to the Death Star. Your climax at that final battle between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, the destruction of the Death Star, then your falling action where everything builds up and we get your resolution or denouement to the next movie. Now, that's a basic narrative structure. And some people are like, well, how does that work with science? Well, if you think about science terms and put it over your narrative structure, you can see they're very similar. Right? If you think about a scientific paper and the way we write them, you've got your introduction, your historical background, which is your problem, basically, where you ask your question or your hypothesis. You've got your methods and materials, which is your rising action. That one's a bit of a stretch, but that's the closest we can get. But then your description, your data, the most important thing that you're trying to convey in your paper is your climax. Then you've got your discussion where you support your data, and then your conclusion. So if you look at the way we talk about science and the way that we have narrative structures, they're the same thing. We just use different words. And that's what I mean when I say that all scientists are inherently storytellers. And in paleontology, it's just as important because the ancient world is just so mysterious to us. We have so many questions that inspires our research. And when we get our research and we share it with our audiences, that's us telling the story of the past, right? Whether we're doing it in a scientific paper, a documentary, anyway, as science storytellers, we are telling the stories of the past. And it's no different if you're a neuroscientist, engineer, any science, even math. That was a hard one for me to figure out, but even math has a story to it. So no matter what we're doing, we're all storytellers, and that works in as we try to be better science communicators or educators. And this isn't new. Science storytelling has been around since the very first cultures. It's just different because while we have a better framework to understand the world around us, ancient cultures didn't. They were just trying to explain the world around them with what they knew, right? So some of the very first legends were actually science stories because they were just trying to explain the natural world around them. Here we've got thunderstones. These are fossil echinoids, sea urchins, right? In ancient Europe, they call them thunderstones. The reason is because ancient Europeans would find them after huge thunderstorms, and they'd find them on the beach. As geologists, we now know that thunderstorms would erode the cliffside and cause these fossils to fall out. But the ancient Europeans thought that they were found at the end of thunderbolts as ancient thunder god threw them to the earth. So they have their explanation for why these thunderstones were found on beaches, and we have our explanations. They're both science stories. We just have different frameworks in which we have to build them. So as an educator, we use this method to really ensure that everyone can connect to science, because there's a lot of talk right now with distrust of scientists, bad education structure, lots of reasons why science isn't communicated or why people can't connect to science easily. There's so many reasons, whether it's cultural, philosophical, economical even. It's very hard for a lot of people to connect. But if we use storytelling, like I said, because it's the basis of everything we do, it's the basis of the exchange of information. By incorporating storytelling and remembering that's what we're doing, we can better connect. We can better connect to people and have science do that. And you don't have to be original. You don't have to be like the ancient peoples creating new stories. You can use all the things around you and have people connect the stories in their lives to the science in their lives. The world is full of so many narratives, whether it's cultural, ecological, or contemporary. We now have so much research showing the role of narrative and the power it has in science communication. So why you use existing narratives? Well, it's all about accessibility, relatability, and of course, diversity. Let's say we're talking about cultural narratives, right? Like I did earlier with the thunderstones. Well, look here. This is a mastodon skull, but ancient people in Greece and Rome, they were finding these as they were building their cities, and they had no idea what these were. They had not seen an elephant skeleton. So what did they do to explain it? They came up with the story of the ancient giants and the Cyclops. Because, if you see an elephant skeleton or a mastodon skeleton laid out in the ground, it looks sort of like a giant human, except its skull is pretty weird and it's got this hole in the middle. Maybe that's where the eye is for the Cyclops, right? But now, even though that story is incorrect, we can connect it because the Cyclops and giants are much more widely known amongst the public. So now you can ask people, hey, do you know what a Cyclops, or do you know the stories of the giants? Well, let me tell you the science that inspired it. And there you are, connecting people to something much more relatable and widely known to science, and hopefully getting them to think critically and ask why, how, and develop those connections to the world around them, expanding their perspectives. Ecological narratives, right? Traditional ecological knowledge is something that a lot more of Western science is incorporating, because like in the Philippines, our stories, our historical reference of ecology, of biology in the world around us, in the forests of the Philippines to the mountains, all of those stories have some connection to the land. And now we can connect the science that we now have in our modern framework to those ancient stories. In Australia, the Aborigine people had stories of firehawks who would light the ground on fire, doesn't check out. But then in more recently, in like 2018, I think, they caught it on film for the first time. And so now the Aborigine people were like, we told you so. And they're like, okay, no, you're right. And so now more and more people are starting to understand that these traditional ecological narratives are actually science, and we can connect it and also help people connect to their own cultures. Here's the one that I did. So not too long ago, they found that skull in the Philippines of Homo luzonensis, that new hominid. And it's a smaller hominid than modern humans. Well, I remember when I was a kid, my grandpa telling me the story of the Chanak, right? Those little demon things that would live in molehills or caves. Well, I started to think about it. Those are really old stories, and maybe the story came about when ancient Filipinos found skeletons and fossils of Homo luzonensis, but didn't know that. And so maybe there's that connection. Maybe our ancient stories of the Chanak were the very first stories describing Homo luzonensis, right? So there is a connection that we can make. And in the Philippines, the Chanak is a very widely known story, at least, in the northern Philippines where my parents are from. And so there's another way to connect science to a widely relatable and accessible story for Filipino audiences. And now there's contemporary. This is where you take, things like pop culture and talk about the science that inspired it. And that is kind of where my project of Cosplay for Science comes about. I love to connect science to pop culture. Here is a talk that I did called Nature Wars: The Rise of Mammals, where I talked about the evolution of mammals from the narrative of the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars, and talking about how mammals were kind of like the underdogs against the dinosaur empire. And they went around having to survive and fight against the empire as the underdogs, and eventually winning the day at the end of the Cretaceous. That is where my project comes around, the Cosplay for Science initiative. Here I am dressed as Professor Oak, where I talked about the science of Pokemon and fossil Pokemon a few years ago. I didn't dye my hair white. I spray painted it white, because there's no way I'm going to dye my hair white like that. But that was a really fun event for me. And that was the very first time that I actually realized that there's something here in connecting science to popular narratives, because they, again, are a relatable and accessible way into science for those who may not be as science-minded or interested in science as most of us are. So really quick, what I'm going to do is show you a quick video intro that I did for a TED Talk talking about Cosplay for Science. I don't know if I turned the sound on for this. So if it doesn't work, I'm very sorry, and I'll skip it. Is there sound? Dang it. Hold on.
I think when you share screen, you have to click like two things in the bottom.
There we go. Let's make sure I did that. Okay, let's try that again. Okay.
From a movie, TV show, anime, or video game. So standing up here as a paleontologist, educator, and cosplayer, I'm sure you're wondering, what do these things have in common? Well, deep at their core, they all revolve around stories. As a paleontologist, I look at the evidence left behind by extinct creatures, interpret that evidence, and then tell its story so that we can learn about the past. As an educator, I take complex science stories, condense them, refine them, and make them accessible to wider audiences. As a cosplayer, I connect to beloved stories in pop culture and bring them to life, whether I'm a superhero, a trainer of monsters, or a space knight with a glowing sword.
Okay, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm usually better at this. Okay, so that's what Cosplay for Science is. That's kind of what the basics are. So Cosplay for Science is a STEAM-powered science communication initiative created to help science more relatable and scientists more approachable through the use of cosplay, pop culture, and help our audiences develop critical thinking skills outside academic settings. Now, Cosplay for Science wasn't just a way for me to find a way for me and my friends to go to Comic-Cons for free. What it was is it was a way for us to really connect to our audiences in a new and innovative way, and teach science in traditionally non-academic settings. If we could get our audiences to think critically in these non-academic settings, we could show them that, you could learn how to ask the right kind of questions in all aspects of your life. And that is kind of what we do at Cosplay for Science. Again, it's to make science accessible and relatable through cosplay, storytelling, and immersion. If you can help them to see science when they're reading a comic book, ask questions when they're watching a science fiction movie or TV or any kind of thing, that allows them to really understand and appreciate science in everyday aspects, and hopefully influences them when they're making decisions that matter, because they now understand that science is in all aspects. It's not just in academic settings. It's not just at universities, in school, at a museum. It's in their living room. It's, when they're driving a car, everywhere. We also want to develop trust in scientists by making us much more approachable. We all know that there's a lot of mistrust in scientists these days, especially because of the last administration here in the US. But there's also a lot that has to do with, the ivory tower, people not wanting to feel dumb or not feeling smart enough to associate with a scientist. But with Cosplay for Science, we change that. They see us as cosplayers first, and they want to talk to us that way. And then when we let them know we're a scientist, that barrier is already broken. And then they want to stay and talk with us more because they're no longer, intimidated or afraid by us. They see us as a person that we share common ground with. And we also want to effectively communicate science, again, through pop culture, and encourage critical thinking in their everyday life. We also try to encourage other scientists to think about accessibility and relatability in science communication. So our framework really is, everything we do is try to make everything formalized, right? We don't just go to Comic-Cons. We do our best to evaluate everything we do. When we're developing, we have best practices. When we talk with our educators and teachers, we develop curriculum kits. We really emphasize cultural connections, and we always utilize universal design in all aspects of our programming, because there's two sides of accessibility. There's making it so you want to talk to it, but it's also so that everyone can use it. Here's an example where I talked about geology as a wilderness explorer when we're visiting Disneyland. That was a really fun one, and it was a cool way to connect my love of Disney and cosplay with my background in geology. One of our more popular things that we do is through our pop-up museums. Our pop-up museums are these ways that we bring science education to these non-academic settings, and they're all themed around some pop culture franchise. So what we do is we combine storytelling, immersion, pop culture, and science for education. It's all interdisciplinary. I'm a paleontologist, but we incorporate biology, genetics. We've done so many things like space and technology. And of course, we try to show the importance of science to everybody and show them that science helped to inspire some of their most favored pop culture franchises. Here we are at our Pokemon Natural History Museum, where again, I'm Professor Oak, talking about the science of fossil Pokemon. I got to work with the Jim Henson Company to create a a pop-up museum for their new book called Frankenstein High, where it was a training ground for future scientists. Here we are talking about anatomy for our future scientists. And another thing that we love to do is, we bring in diversity. We bring in scientists from all backgrounds, all research backgrounds, into these non-academic settings where everybody can see scientists as people first. And it's just a really cool feeling when, you can sit there and you have some little Filipino kid look up at you and say, like, "Are you a paleontologist?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." He's like, that's so cool. I've never met a Filipino scientist. And I was like, well, now we're friends. And so it's just one of the more social aspects of our Cosplay for Science initiative that we really, really try to emphasize. Here's our Star Wars pop-up museum talking about the natural history of Star Wars. We're talking, here's an X-Wing pilot talking about saber-toothed cats with Rey. Here is, so really, we're also not just, we're not just going out there. Part of the Cosplay for Science is it's an actual research initiative. We are trying to study perceptions of scientists and how we can break down those barriers, and also study efficacy of teaching methods. So, we always measure our engagement. We met thousands of people through our pop-up museums. And this is our data from 2018. 2019, we had so many more people, thousands more, but we weren't able to record a lot of it, unfortunately. And of course, we evaluate our scientists or our pop-up museums to ensure that, we are talking with people and that people are leaving with something, and that we are learning ourselves as scientists and researchers how to be better educators every single day. So here are some of our evaluations that are really interesting. Following the Pop Museum, how likely are you to visit a museum? 63% said that they are now more likely to visit a museum. And this was also showing us that we were reaching brand new audiences who had never been to museums before. And when you work in a museum, that's one of those questions like, how do I get people to come? Well, we're now seeing that we can go to them and bring in new, unique audiences. On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are you in learning more about natural history? 60% said that they were very interested, with no answers below a 7. Would you like to see more educational programming at future exhibits? 68% said that they would love to see more educational programming. And following our cosplay scientists, how likely are you now to approach scientists to ask questions? And 44% they were now more likely to approach a scientist. It's not 100, but that's still something, showing that, we are doing something more to break down these barriers and help others understand that science is awesome, that, we can help people smile when they think about science in their everyday lives and interests. Like in My Hero Academia, Deku wants to be the hero who can make everyone smile. Well, as scientists, we want to be those scientists and teachers who can make everyone smile when they think about science, and, not feel dumb, because science is for everybody. That was the same question. And, here are some other things where people talk about things that they learned and that they loved at the museum. And of course, we still have a lot more research to do, but it's still showing us that we've got some positive impact with our audiences. And I think when it comes down to it, one of my favorite quotes here is, as scientists and educators, we know that understanding the truth is honoring understanding is honoring the truth beneath the surface. When we can get others to understand that as well, we're one step closer to having a world guided by science as well. And that can go a long way with all the problems that we have nowadays. And, just for fun, this is actually one of the opening titles from Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So thank you all so much for listening to me ramble a little bit. If you want to follow me on Instagram, yes, prequels were awesome. If you want to follow me on Instagram, there's my Instagram and my Twitter. There's my website as well. If you want to connect with me, I'm always happy to talk about Cosplay for Science or science communication and education. And again, that's the QR code if you want to connect to me in any way. And I know I talked a little bit longer than I should have, but I'm happy now to take any questions.
I have a question. This is Anthony.
Yeah.
How would someone that's in computer science go into paleontology? I'm asking for a friend.
So if you want to get into paleontology, one of the first things I would say is try to volunteer at a local museum, like the Alf Museum, when we're open to the public. And, that's a great way to connect and learn the ropes, I would say. And then from there, you can go into a lot of jobs that actually only require a BS, not only that require a BS, but actually there's a huge need for computer science these days in paleontology as we move into more data-driven analysis, 3D modeling, yeah, there's such a need for computer and data analysis within paleontology. So that's a great entry, actually. You just need to get a little bit more of the background of geology and biology. So
Well,
I
I'll
better
pass
see
that
your
on
name
to
on
my
that.
friend. Thank
Yeah, I
you.
better see your friend's application on my volunteer list in a year or so. All
Okay, I'll remember to. I mean, my friend will do that for you.
right, cool.
Just wondering, have you ever been to Chicago and seen like Sue at the Field Museum? Have you had a chance? You gotta visit me, man. Do.
Yeah, I was just in Chicago actually
Oh,
right
yeah?
before quarantine. One of my best friends is a paleontologist at U Chicago, and I love the Field Museum. I hope to go back there if everything's fine by the end of this year, because we want to do a pop-up museum at the Field Museum there. So hopefully I can see you there.
Yeah, I hope so. That's awesome. You're awesome, man. Seriously, no joke.
Thank you. I'm just
I
a
think
guy
you should
trying to be a
visit.
good teacher.
I think you should visit me instead in DC. We got a bigger museum for you to go
Actually,
look at.
Actually, Fred, I'm supposed to be going to DC at the end of the year also for the Nat Geo stuff. So I'll hit you up when I'm there.
Oh yes, definitely. I did have a question though. Well, first
Yeah.
I'll start with I think what what you have here is really innovative. Really innovative. I think particularly because both it appeals to kids and adults. I mean, adults will watch or all these types of movies or just kind of like TV shows or comics. Um, yeah, but like I guess what do you see this initiative like going further? Like what more you think you could do with it? Besides, right now you've done the pop up, you've done like kind of like these talking events. Like, do you see something else? Like, how can you bring it further?
The way we want to do it is in two directions, right? We want the more professional direction where we have an actual research program. We have the scientists. We're applying for grants to conduct research to actually show that this methodology is a way to connect people with data, not just us saying it, but we have data to prove that people are learning. On the more social side of things, we want to create more programs where people can have direct interaction with scientists. So we're starting a Twitch channel. I have a Twitch channel. We're doing more live shows and cons. And we want to have a more formal pop-up museum program that we can drive and bring to Comic-Cons and other community events. We don't just do Comic-Cons. We do all sorts of community events at libraries, other museums. I'm really trying to get one started in the Philippines. I was starting one before the pandemic. But hopefully with the National Geographic stuff, that's what I'm hoping to do, is bring this to the Philippines and other places where this could be more effective, because there is a huge disparity in educational access, especially when you talk about socioeconomic status. This is a great way to bring that to people because it's not necessarily an academic setting. It's a more informal setting, but we incorporate that important critical thinking framework. Shihan, I will also say that Ross Geller is a terrible example of a paleontologist. And I'm not blaming you anything, because if that's the only example that's fine. But I would recommend watching Jurassic Park and see some real good examples of paleontologists. But yeah, no, that's kind of what we want to do with Cosplay for Science. We're always looking for members. We have a Discord if you ever want to join and talk more about it. So.
Oh man, I'm down for Discord.
Yeah, it's on my website.
Say less.
Not a science. Okay, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Anthony? Questions do you keep? Like, do you have right now? I don't know. It seems like
I have. Oh man, I think I probably have like 15 cosplays in my closet right now, and I've run out of space. I have a few that I put in like boxes in my garage. And I'm one of those people who are impulsive buyers. So I see something like that would make a great cosplay, so I buy it, and now I'm really bad with clothes. Like I love clothes and shopping, so it's just another bad thing for me. But I have a lot. I should probably Marie Kondo my closet pretty soon.
It's okay. It's for science.
Yeah, that's how I keep justifying it. Anyone else?
I want to say thank you to Gabe for presenting tonight. This is really cool. Getting to know your work and like the things that you do for the community. Thank you for gracing our invitation tonight. And I'm really excited about your work, your plan to do like more communication or education in
Did-
the Philippines.
Am I frozen?
No,
No, it's
Oh.
probably
It's not you.
probably.
It's Carly.
It's
Oh,
me.
okay.
But yeah, like let us know if APSA could help in a way to, like, our members could probably be able to help you in a way, or like, wait, am I frozen still? No. Okay.
No, you're good right now.
But yeah, excited. Thank you so much, Gabe. This is really interesting and
No, thank you so
inspiring.
much. Yeah, no, thank you so much for inviting me. I really would love to participate more whenever I can. I was joking earlier, but I am kind of old. So I have a lot more, unfortunately, like professional obligations, but please let me know how I can help as well. And I will definitely let you all know, because, as we do more Twitch panels and things like that, we are looking for more experts and different scientists to join us on those. Right now I'm starting a live stream of ARC and what's that one ocean video game called? I can't remember what it's called right now, but I'm looking for marine biologists and people who can talk about ocean science, climate change, and things like that in more informal settings. So check out my website, join us on there. And also I saw that idea for a Cosplay for Science meeting for AFSA. I would love to help with that. That would be so cool. And if you ever want to do your own Cosplay for Science pop-up thing, I would always recommend going to your local cons when things are safe, obviously, and try to submit or propose a panel talking about your science and the way that it connects to a franchise that you love. That's how we started, and it worked. So please go ahead. I would really suggest you all try that.
Yeah, and now that Gabe is mentioning about not helping, actually Gabe was involved a lot when AFSA was just starting. He was like making videos to promote AFSA and made logos and stuff like that. So I want to recognize that as well. Thank you, Gabe, for your help for AFSA.
Oh yeah, Captain America. Oh, but also, yeah, it was my pleasure. Like I said, I love this so much, and so I'm here to help. I unfortunately have to get to another meeting right now at 5:30, but like I said, thank you all so much for inviting me, and I hope to connect with all of you more in the future. All right.
Hi, Gabe. Thank you. And that's kind of also the end of Kumustan here. It's just about 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 on the East. So if you want to hang out, stick around. I'm sure people will stick around. I have to get going pretty soon too. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up. Oh, we're still recording. It's